Well, I think it's definitely good news. We're hoping for a better outcome because 10 years is a long time to be in limbo.
Prime Minister Scott Morrison, I am speaking to you. Alex Hawke, Minister for Immigration, I am speaking to you. We call upon you to exercise justice in the revoking of TPVs and their replacement with permanent residency.
So we're here today to amplify the voices of those who don't have anyone to speak for them. So for people who have been here for over 10 years on temporary visas and nothing has been done for them. So this is really for them and to make sure their voices are known.
The only hope is to see my family again. Hello everyone. I'm speaking on behalf of Reza, who is unable to tell his story himself as it's too painful for him to speak. Here are Reza's words. I was a happy person when I arrived in Australia, but I'm not the same person anymore.
As refugees living on temporary protection visas in Australia, we have had 10 years of family separation. Our newborn babies are now 10. Our 10-year-olds are now 20. Our grandmothers and grandfathers have died without us being by their sides.
Protection! 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 Reunite the families! Reunite the families!
باين يقديس شنمو طايفة بازيرة ختم كذا متهيد شنمو آخر شي نقصان منمو تا خيرة تايفاي مشمو پورمو یک هزاری چرای قز بیشاری بیار بی سهاری کشتی بی کناری کم باشی جم باشی همیشه ما کم باشی کجک دی خوی ساده د خوشی و غم باشی چار طرف مو چرا بند شونه زندگی بله مو چرا سخت شونه جوانای مو دل شی چرا تنگ شونه از نیمو زیادی فرق شده دور از خانه از دل مسافر خدا میدانه خانه پریشانه بچه تبال نادانه چطور تیر مونه د ملکی بیگانه زندگی قدر یتانه زندگی برای خود آسانه لیکن زندگی ما بله قوم همیش قربانه فیملی بودن یک جهانه مادر پدر جانه هر بنده خدا در زی دنیا مهمانه آخر جایشی دا آسمانه سازش این زمانه از هم دیگه جدا نه اگر مو یک باشی تیر مونی هر طوفانه فهمیدین تیر مونی هر طوفانه
کاکای سلام.
سلام.
خوب هستی؟ خیری بخیری جان بجوره. کاکای امروز شما از خاطر چی هم اینجا میدین؟
ما از خاطر اوزه.
خب شما چند سال شده که بدون مدرک در استرالیا زندگی می‌کنین؟
2 سال میشه.
2 سال میشه. در این 2 سال شما حق سفر نداشتین؟
نه دیگه، نه سفر داری، نه هیچ چیز نده دیگه. 2 سال میشه ما این زندان مانده دیگه.
به نام زندان طلایی؟
آره زندان مانده زندان.
کجا زندگی می‌کنی کاکا؟ ملبورن هستی؟ خوشحال شدیم کاکا جان.
تشکر، زنده باشید.
So we're here for people who have been on temporary visas for over 10 years. Like they came here when their children were about 10 years. Their children would be 20 years old by now. They've lost their family, their childhood. They've lost funerals. They've lost marriages. They've missed everything. So really, it's to make sure that change is made and to make sure that we're here to fight for policy change and to make their voices heard. And I guess the last message I would say is to Scott Morrison himself. You have the power, you have the ability to make change. These people need your help, we need your help. And you can do it in such a short period of time. You can make such a crazy change for so many amount of people. So please do it. We have so many people that do everything that citizens do, and all we need to do is give them permanent protection and they can enjoy their lives just as much as any other Australian.
Thank you very much.
No
Thank you.
worries.
Appreciate it.
One father who applied for permission to see his family, who has sought refuge in India, has had his application for permission to travel rejected. Apparently, not seeing your family for years is not a compelling and compassionate enough grounds for the government to give this man permission to travel. This young gentleman was told that families of refugees must now be on their deathbed for permission to be granted. Just think about that. How ridiculous is that?
To be able to welcome the strangers and make them our friends. To the people here today and all around our nation who've come from Afghanistan, as a Christian leader, I bid you welcome and assure you of my prayers and the prayers of many others. We pray for a just and merciful outcome in this current and ongoing struggle with our government. We pray for your families, whether they're here or still in Afghanistan. We pray for your fulfillment and happiness as you continue here in Australia. We pray that this might be your permanent home. Welcome.
And our community members have been suffering in agony for the last 10 years, and it's only been exacerbated by the recent events in Afghanistan where family members are isolated, they can't bring their families here, and for many of these community members, they've grown up in Australia, especially the young people, they can't attain education because it's not free, their scholarships are expiring, so we're here trying to get better reforms, better policy reforms, and trying to make the government understand that 10 years in detention or in outdoor detention it's ridiculous, and we want better outcomes for our refugee comrades. Our community is one of the most hard-working people in Australia, and the 10 years in detention, they've worked hard, they've set up businesses, and they've created a community around Australian ethos and way of life. Unfortunately, because the refugee issue has been so politicised and securitized, that it's gone outside of it's gone out of the fold of human rights, and it's become too politicised, and we're here to tell the government that refugee rights are human rights, and being 10 years in detention, working hard, paying tax, and not having the certainty of permanent residency and citizenship, it's just ridiculous. I just want to let our community members who are on TPV and SHEV holders that please do not lose hope. Your community is here, your community is supporting and advocating for your rights, because we will not leave you alone. No matter how much the government delays your visas, we will be here, we will advocate, and we will ensure policy reform. Please join me in welcoming Sophie Singh.
Thank you, and it's so wonderful to see so many people coming out today to stand up for justice for refugees from Afghanistan. It's just so inspiring. Thank you. The Australian government talks a lot about families. They reassure us that they care about families, that they understand the pain that families have been suffering through separation because of the pandemic, that they will support families. And yet, it seems, according to the Morrison government, not all families are included in these grand statements. A very substantial part of our community is excluded. Refugees who've been living on temporary visas for up to 10 years, enforced separation from their families, denied the possibility of reunion. According to the Morrison government, these families don't deserve the right to be together. And clearly the Morrison government is comfortable about keeping people they recognise as refugees on temporary visas for years and years and years. Living with constant uncertainty, living with anxiety and fear for their safety and those of their families. And the Morrison government is counting on Australians being comfortable with that ongoing cruelty. The years of cruelty, the years of harm have had an impact in the broader Australian community. They have hardened the hearts of some people. They have closed the eyes of some. And sadly, the hardest hearts and those most blind and indifferent to the suffering of refugees from Afghanistan are up in that house up there. Our so-called political leaders are hoping that we will stay silent and not demand justice, not demand compassion, not demand permanent protection for refugees from Afghanistan and all refugees. Last week, New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrottet described it as the darkest day of Australia. Was he talking about the trauma that refugees from Afghanistan are facing after living years and years of uncertainty? Was he talking about the up to 10 years of detention that refugees are experiencing in this country? Was he talking about the constant fear that refugees from Afghanistan have for their families back in Afghanistan? No, he was talking about a bunch of text messages calling Morrison a psycho. In Australia, the suffering of refugees is something that the former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull summed up as something that we should not be misty-eyed about, something that we should not be upset about, something that we should just accept. But there have always been people across Australia from every walk of life who have refused to accept the cruelty, who have refused to accept the politics of punishment and deterrence, and who have demanded justice and compassion for refugees. And our numbers are growing, and they are going to continue to grow. And we will continue to stand up time and time again in solidarity with refugees and people seeking asylum, alongside refugees and people seeking asylum, and to support refugees and people seeking asylum. Because protection from danger must mean permanent protection. It must mean the right to build a life with your family in safety, security and certainty. And so we will not go away, we will not be silent until we have won these basic rights for all people living in Australia. Because that is the type of Australia that I want to live in. Thank you.
والله برای از منا که ویزه 5 ساله است خدایی خیلی سخته. خیلی کسایی که 3 ساله است، کسایی هست که یه ویزه نداره. اونا کسایی بودن که مثلا پدر مادر داشتن که تیم که اینجا مادر ولی اینا پدر مادر رزیست دادن، زن فرزند داشتن رزیست دادن، بچه‌هاش ریزه بود، اونا نفهمید که بچه‌هاش مو چرخم کلان شد. اما مهر پدری و مادری که اونا مثلا میخواست بچه‌هاش بینگرنه ور ندید. یا که بار خیلی هست که مثال که وقتی که دو بچه زنگ میزنه مثلا چی بنا حتی بچه پسر نمینخشه، دختر پدر نمینخشه، تمام بیگانه شد. مثال خیلی مشکلات آمد، مردم مریض شد. سیچویشن از اون طرف خودشون خبرید که در چی شرایط سخت است نمو مردم. باز علمیه که خلاصه خیلی مدبله مشکلات است. امروز روزم کسا کلگی جمع شدن که بخیر می داد از مو برسه خدایی مو بخی. خیلی مردم ها هست که مثلا افسردگی گرفته، فراموشی گرفته، خیلی کارا هست که از جا چموره، یک کار روز بخوای کن است تا 2 ساعت دیگر از جا چموره. یعنی می هست که خیلی ها مریض شده، خیلی ها هست که مویای سر سفید شد، خدایی ریزه 17 ساله، 16 ساله، 20 ساله این جماعت اگه نه 31 سالش ده، 40 سالش ده، لیکن خیلی هاش هست تبال مرخم مجرد منده مزی خاطر مزی مشکلات. زوریایش هست تازه آرسیک ده، منی یک ماه منده، اینال 2 سال از آرسی تیر شده. خلاصه این سختی ها هست دیگه. تشکر آقای سروری.
Thank you very much. بسیار nice message. تشکر.